Just because it's January doesn't mean you can't make a dynasty trade. And on today's episode of the Regression to the Mean podcast, we have part 2 of our early off-season buys and sells. We're going to be finishing up this series of episodes with our favorite early off-season January sells. I am your host, Sean Moran, and I am joined by my co-host, my good friend, and my fellow ball knower, Aidan Haller. Aidan, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are up 10-0 on the Philadelphia Eagles. Feel bad for our buddy Hubert here. It's not been a good end of the season for our buddy Hugh. You longtime Eagles fan.
They were sitting 10-1. I was like, wow, this team, here we go again. And dude lost 5 of their remaining 6. It's brutal. And yeah, things don't look good. So maybe they turn around. Maybe not. But yeah, tough watch as of late for that team. Feels like there's a lot of like locker room things going on too. Everything's getting out. There's just like leaks left and right. So bad vibes, as we like to say on the program, just bad vibes.
I read an article about how Jalen Hurts wants to run more intermediate stuff over the middle to AJ Brown, and I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That's actually kind of a good
makes
good
a ton
idea.
of sense.
Yeah, to throw that ball.
Yeah.
I think Sirianni might get fired. I think it's on the table, which sounds crazy.
Someone said that to me the other day, and I was like, I don't think so, but it wouldn't be like the great. I don't know. We'll see. 1 year removed from the Super Bowl, epic meltdown here. And I don't know. It would be not pretty insane.
You'd have to have a very good coach lined up. You couldn't just
That's kind of what I was thinking too. Yeah.
I mean, if Bill Belichick wants to coach the Eagles or something, maybe go for it. Or Mike Vrabel,
or
Mike
Harbaugh,
Vrabel wants to do. Like maybe go that route. But I wouldn't drop Sirianni just for I don't know, Frank Smith or some shit. I don't know.
Yeah.
But before we dive into our early off-season sells, 2 things. If you're a part of the 70% of people who enjoy our channel but aren't yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on any regression to the mean content in the future. And 2, if you love player prop apps like Prize Picks or Underdog, and you're looking to get in on the action for the NFL playoffs, you're going to love today's sponsor of the Regression to the Mean podcast, Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. Chalkboard's picks game is very similar to what you probably played again on Prize Picks or Underdog, but what makes them unique is the fact that you can take alternate lines. That's right. You have some custom ability. That's not a word. You have an ability to customize your slips in a way that other apps just really aren't allowing you to do it. We've been chalking our board nonstop. Go download the app with the link in the description of this episode and use promo code RTM to double your deposit up to $100. Aidan, early off-season sells.
Let's do it.
We got 6 of them.
Yeah. I'm just going to start spicy.
Okay. All right, let's hear
it. It's a spicy one. Not everyone's going to agree with it, but I'm just going to do it anyway. I'm selling Patrick Mahomes. I'm selling Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. Bad year for Patrick Mahomes, and it just feels like things are kind of trending in the wrong direction in terms of like what he's priced at and like the production you're getting. He's QB2 on Keep Trade Cut. Josh Allen is obviously number 1. CJ Stroud is up to QB3 on Keep Trade Cut. Patrick Mahomes just turned 28 this last fall, so still relatively young. It's not like he's old or whatever. Had his worst year since 2019 in terms of passing yards and passing touchdowns, which again, he still threw for just over 4,000 yards, had 27 touchdowns. So, a pretty solid season. Most INTs of his career, 14. You could argue some of those weren't his fault. You got Kadarius Toney, bouncing balls off his hand and kind of hand delivering it to the defense. Finished QB8 on the year. So again, still performing relatively well. His supporting cast worries me though. Just starting with Kelce, I think there's a legitimate possibility that Travis Kelce retires this summer, which is an issue. The offense already stinks, and it's Travis Kelce running. Feels like 75-80%. He just doesn't look like himself out there. The wide receivers aren't very good. Obviously, Rashee Rice has really come on of late, and I feel good about him going into next year. But outside of that, the offensive pass catchers are kind of a disaster. And this does come with an asterisk on it. I think unless you are like an all-in team and like you're at like the top of your standings, I would sell Patrick Mahomes because, in my opinion, like I don't see much of a difference between flipping him for QB6, QB7 plus some picks, or plus like a different position of need on your roster. I think the production you're gonna get from Patrick Mahomes versus what, say, Jared Goff or something, really isn't that drastic. But the way that he's priced, that is quite dramatic in terms of the value for those type of guys and what Patrick Mahomes has given you. So you know it's it's a spicy one, but it just feels like the gap between QB play really isn't as wide as I think we were expecting, and the difference between him and someone else versus like the value and kind of like holes you could plug by selling him, I think are totally worth it.
Yeah, I'm torn on this one. Because what if they get super aggressive? What if they get bounced by the Bills in round 2, and it's clearly because their wide receiver core stinks? What if they
Yep.
get like super aggressive and they bring in a vet to pair with Rice, then draft a rookie, and all of a sudden their wide receiver core is much, much, much better. Their
Yeah.
offensive line's good, their defense is good. He ran super hot in touchdowns in 2022 and won the MVP. This year doesn't score as many touchdowns. I feel you in the sense of like there
You could
wasn't
get
that
burned for
much
sure.
difference between Mahomes. I had Mahomes and Jordan Love on a team this year, and Jordan Love was better
Was
in
outscoring him.
fantasy
Yeah.
than Pat Mahomes.
Yeah, he was what,
I mean,
6, right?
yeah,
Jordan
like
Love, I think he was QB6. Yeah.
down the stretch, I mean, he threw 18 touchdowns, right? So like 2 picks. So it's just kind
Ton
of
of
crazy to think
touchdowns,
about
yeah.
what he did.
Yeah.
But I feel like Mahomes is a hold unless you can get like a really big package for him. Pause. But if you could get a big haul for Mahomes, I think that's worthwhile. Imagine if you could get a Jordan Love plus. Maybe you get Jordan Love plus
Yeah,
some
that's kind of
picks,
what I was thinking.
plus some
Totally.
players. But like my only fear is if you trade Mahomes this early in the offseason, and then Kansas City turns around and just completely redoes their pass catching core, and all of a
You'll
sudden
get
it's
burned.
like
You could get
really
burned.
good, And
Yep.
I don't know, that division. Maybe that division's getting better, right? So like the Raiders could be better next year. Jim Harbaugh could be with the Chargers. Sean Payton in year 2. So I could see it getting off the Mahomes train a little bit earlier. But I'm gonna hold on Mahomes, but I could totally
Okay.
justify the trade in the early offseason.
Yeah. I think the package you could get is like the biggest thing is, I think, like if you've got other holes on your roster and you're like not, like right there with like a complete roster, go flip them. Go plug in some other holes. Go get some extra picks this year in the first round, and develop your team. So yeah, I think this one definitely depends on what is your roster like construction look like right now, and like where do you stand in terms of like your timeline to contention. But yeah, you could definitely talk me into selling him.
I'm trading a QB too, and it's pretty spicy.
Who we got?
It's pretty spicy. He's the QB5 right now on Keep Trade Cut. He was the QB1 in points per game in 2022. He was the QB2 in points per game in 2023, and that is the 25-year-old Jalen Hurts.
Wow.
And it feels pretty audacious because the guy's basically been a fantasy cheat
These are
code
both spicy. Yeah.
for 3 years now. But my main argument is regression with Jalen Hurts. That plus if the tush push gets outlawed or Jason Kelce retires. So it's like if the tush push is removed or it loses some of its effectiveness for Philadelphia, definitely something to keep an eye on. So in 2022, Jalen Hurts leads all quarterbacks with 25.6 fantasy points per game. Guy was an absolute league winner in the 6th round. Heading into this year, we thought Hurts was capable of sustaining that production because of his elite rushing role and the fact that the Eagles would be pass happier in 2023. That was our thesis, right? When we were doing all those mock drafts, right? We fast forward a year later. Hurts finishes the year averaging 23 fantasy points per game, weeks 1 through 16, which was 2nd overall. And even though his numbers were down across the board in comparison to 2022 and 2023, he put up a really strong season. If you look at his TD rate, his TD rate was down, interception rate was up, yards per attempt were down. He was much worse this season, like from an underlying metrics, than he was in 2022, but he still was quite elite in fantasy. Now, Windhorse fingers, Aidan. Now, why would that be? He scored 15 rushing touchdowns, most ever for a quarterback in a season. That accounted for 25% of his fantasy production. 11 of those rushing touchdowns came from the tush push. So 18%. 18% of his fantasy production this past season came from the tush push. I find it highly unlikely he scores 15 touchdowns next year.
Especially it feels like Kelsey is retiring, which is like he is like, like he is the driver of that play. I think they can succeed without him there, but like we know that's a huge part of that play's success and for his success.
The Eagles aren't getting any younger. Their offensive coordinator took a big step back from Shane Steichen to Brian Johnson. And it may be if, Jason Kelsey comes back, we see a full year out of Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown together. The offensive line is a little bit better than it was this past year, and they get better play calling. Then all of a sudden, Jalen Hurts' passing production can buoy his, maybe regression in rushing touchdowns. However, I just don't see that happening. And look, if Jalen Hurts next year scores 20 fantasy points instead of 23, that's totally fine. Like I'm cool with that. But what I'm saying is I don't know if I'd have him above Joe Burrow because it's basically the same production. Joe Burrow basically averages 20 to 21 fantasy points per game. I feel like Jalen Hurts is a bit overvalued. And like a good example of this is Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is right now currently QB9 on Keep Trade Cut. He's only 1 year older than Jalen Hurts. He's got an ascending play caller in Drew Petzing. He's got a stud tight end in Trey McBride. He potentially has Marvin Harrison Jr. headed his way. I would trade Jalen Hurts for Kyler Murray plus. You get back more because of how valued Hurts is.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. Like, what's the difference that much between Murray and Jalen Hurts next year? Maybe it's big. Maybe I'm overreacting to the Eagles' late season troubles, but this looks like a team kind of falling apart from the seam a bit. I still think Jalen Hurts is going to be phenomenal in fantasy, but I don't know if he's going to score 23 fantasy points per game based off of his rushing touchdown production next year. So I'm trading Hurts, man. I'm getting off him.
Yeah, I think that's pretty valid. The 15 touchdowns, 11 coming from the one,
is insane.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. Like we've said the word time and time again, like regression, it's always there. It's always lurking. And I think there's some serious regression coming for that rushing TD output. I'd argue though the INTs will probably come down. That was a huge anomaly. So I think INTs will come down. I think rushing touchdowns also come down. I'd be fine trading him for like a Kyler Murray plus. And again, like I think this one too is like very dependent on like what does your roster makeup look like. Like I'm not making this trade if I'm top 2, top 3 team in the league. If you're somewhere in the middle of the pack though, I'm gonna unload him. I'll let him go get some more assets.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Who's number 2?
I'm going to sell. So this is someone that I have been very low on since he entered the league last season and had his little second half breakout. Can't stay on the field. You could argue this is a sell low, but I think I'm just getting out of kind of sunken costs here. And it's Christian Watson. The outlook now versus, last January for Christian Watson has, diminished quite dramatically. Just looking at him on Keep Trade Cut, I think his price alone tells you, I think, how people feel about him. He's currently the wide receiver 30 in between Mike Evans and Josh Downs. I'm taking Mike Evans over Christian Watson in a heartbeat. I'm probably taking Josh Downs too. These are two guys that, more established roles, both staying on the field. Christian Watson's young, turns 25 this May, so age isn't really an issue for me. The real issue is he's missed 11 games in 2 seasons. This is a guy kind of just has like chronic hamstring issues. More than just hamstring issues. He's just like a walking medical report at this point. And it's a little dramatic, but you could argue he's the 4th best wide receiver in that offense at this point. Jaden Reed is better than him. Romeo Doubs is better than him. Dontavian Wicks. I'm starting to come around on Dontavian Wicks. This guy's legit. Big fan of him.
He's good.
And then you got Christian Watson. You got the 2 rookie tight ends. Like he is quickly sliding down that depth chart and really like out of their scheme. He had 1 target yesterday, 9 yards, playoff game. Sure, he's probably not 100%. It just feels like you can't you can't design an offense around a guy that is consistently not on the field. And like Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs, 100%, I would take over Christian Watson at this point. Sure, you've got his high upside, big playability, but it's really just not someone that I'm very interested in. Go get a second round pick for him. If you could somehow include a deal with a first rounder for Christian Watson, that'd be a miracle. You're probably looking at a second rounder. I just think I'm just going to get out of this asset. It's it's so up and down with him. I just don't see a world where he's consistently playing 15 plus games and giving the production that we thought he'd potentially be capable of this year. So I'm getting out of it. Sorry, Christian.
It really was a nightmare. I had him on 4 teams this season.
Yeah.
And he misses the first 3 games because he tweaks his hamstring right before the start of the season, which is just
Brutal.
New quarterback, you're trying to build rapport. Year 2, tweaks his hamstring. He has a couple like decent games on high volume, but he doesn't look good. Like Jordan Love's kind of forcing the ball to him. Turnovers are happening. It's not pretty. He then basically rips off like a month straight of like running routes, getting nothing. And the Packers offense also was terrible for that month. And then the Packers have that game where they beat the Chargers. He scores a touchdown. And then they have that huge game against Detroit on Thanksgiving. And he catches a touchdown. He scores 20 fantasy points. And then he has that monster game against the Chiefs. And he looks like, it's like, holy shit, Watson's happening. Like it
He's
took
back.
13 weeks. It's happening. He scores 27 fantasy points, 9 targets, 7 catches, 71 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pulled hammy right at the end of the game. Basically ruined his season. It really sunk the rest of his year. And I think it's super valid. I think Jaden Reed is probably better than Watson. I mean, Romeo Dobbs looked amazing against the Cowboys. Dontavian Wicks might actually be really fucking good, by the way. He might end up being better than Jaden Reed. And we love Jaden Reed on this podcast, but Wicks does some stuff as a route runner that is
the size.
His size.
The size, yeah.
It kind of does feel.
I don't know how they keep doing it. They are so good at drafting day 2 wide receivers and developing them.
They are.
It's torture. It's absolute torture.
I think my comment on Watson is I think it's super fair to trade him. At the same time, Jordan Love looks really good. And if the Packers are going to reach the potential that they want to reach, which is winning a Super Bowl with Jordan Love, I think Christian Watson needs to be healthy. I think he needs to be healthy and be the player
can't do that.
Can be. So
yeah,
it's major Will Fuller vibes at this point. When he plays, he's pretty fucking good. But when he's just not really available. So
I can't afford for him to play eight games a year on my fantasy squad. That doesn't move the needle for me. I'm gonna go get a pick. I'm gonna go take a swing on a wide receiver in the second round of my drafts this year, and go from there. I'd be okay with getting burned there. Like I don't see a world where he's a yearly top 10 like wide receiver. It's just it doesn't really feel like it's in the realm of possibilities to me.
I'm a mega fan, but yeah. It was a really disappointing year.
It's more hashtag bad vibes.
Yeah, the injuries plus the fact that there's just so many dudes. There's so many dudes in this offense now where it's like, ooh, he might get passed up a little bit here.
Because we kind of thought like he was the only like capable wide receiver in that offense, and that is like the farthest thing from the truth. It's like they kind of got a handful. Now.
They got 4 dudes. It's pretty remarkable, and they have
plus the tight ends and Aaron Jones. Man, plus the tight end.
I can't believe.
Yeah, what the hell, dude?
I can't believe
that's not a real person. That's like the Madden like random name generator.
My second guy that I'm selling is another guy I loved in the offseason who has been pretty banged up for the first 2 years of his career, and that's Kenneth Walker, the RB9 on Keep Trade Cut. 23 years old. Walker looked so good down the stretch in a couple games. That game he had against the Eagles was basically everything you could ask for with Kenneth Walker, just turning nothing into a 40-yard touchdown. The guy is so electric. He's a really fun player, but I'm really sketched out about who the Seahawks are going to hire because Pete Carroll's gone. I think they keep Shane Waldron. What's the deal with their offense? And I think his price of RB9, I don't think it's taking into account that he shares a backfield with a running back who's just been more consistent this season. It was Zach Charbonnet, who's also another round 2 guy. And I know when they were both healthy, Kenneth Walker outsnapped. I know it. I get it, right? But at the end of the day, Zach Charbonnet's underlying metrics were pretty much even with Kenneth Walker's in 2023. Yards after contact per attempt, K9, 2.7. Charbonnet, 2.9. Success rate, K9, 46%. Charbo, 50%. Explosive run rate, equal. They had the same explosive run rate. I would have not guessed that, of 4.6%.
I would not have guessed that.
Rush yards over expected per attempt, K9, minus 0.13. Charbo, 0.18. Target share, 6.9% K9, 7.1% Charbo. Walker was better in the red zone, and he was better at forcing missed tackles. But that's about it, man. And I'm a huge fan of Walker, but he's not priced like a back who shares a backfield with another young and talented round 2 running back. If Walker doesn't keep a hold of this goal line role, Aidan, it's going to be incredibly difficult for him to remain the RB9 in Dynasty moving forward. And it's hard to know for certain if he will, considering there might be a new play caller in Seattle next year. So I love Kenneth Walker. I know you do too. I'm not trying to sour on how talented he is. Maybe he's a good buy low because of all of this. Maybe I'm being an idiot. But our RB9, that just seems too high. It just seems too high. It seems too high for Walker.
He feels like he's priced too high, and I think I think like the things you nailed on like the most is like the uncertainty around like I think Waldron is definitely gone. Obviously, Pete Carroll's gone. Pete Carroll's always been like a bell cow running back. I think like even though Sharp looked very good, it's just like kind of just likes to get his RB hot, give him his touches, get settled in. So I could definitely see a world where a new play caller comes in and, like that snap share is like closer to 50-50, whereas Kenneth Walker was kind of just dominating, 70+% snaps most games. And I think something else also to take into account is there's no telling who's going to be playing QB there next year. I know one of the biggest kind of reasons Pete Carroll left, according to some reports, where he feels like they're very close with Geno Smith, where the org wants to go someone young. They want to draft someone this year. So there's no telling. I would assume Geno is going to start the year regardless, but don't be surprised if they try to make a move for a quarterback in the first round this year. I think the front office has their eyes on someone, and that was kind of one of the big reasons with Pete Carroll kind of down the stretch here, which led to them ultimately parting ways. So I love Kenneth Walker. I think, home run hitting ability, great in the red zone, but yeah, too expensive. RB9 is that feels a bit much. I want to see what other running backs are right there just while I'm talking about him.
You get ETN, Kenneth Walker, James Cook, Rachaad White, Saquon. I'd rather have Isaiah Pacheco right now than Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, James Cook is RB10. Easily rather have James Cook. You got Rachaad White there, Saquon, Pacheco. I'm probably putting him closer to like 15. Personally,
he's so talented. This is not, and I know some people are out here saying talent over situation, and I agree, right? But I don't know. If I were trying to win next year, I don't think I'd want to have Kenneth Walker on my
team. A really hard eval. I've got him on at least one of my dynasty teams, and it's like, yeah, you kind of don't know what to do with him. Them drafting Charbonnet was just like, it was such a kick in the nuts. And it still feels like a kick in the nuts because they're both really talented. It's just bad for fantasy football. Really, really good for real football. Yeah, it just sucked. So, no, I think that's a good one. It's valid. There's a lot of murkiness in terms of what does that team look like? What does his role look like next year?
All right. Who's the last guy you're selling before we get out of here?
Yeah, let's keep the fun train going. I've actually got another running back myself, a little farther down. I'm looking at the RB18 right now in Deandre Swift. So this is someone actually that I'm selling high on. It's just not someone that I personally feel very confident about going forward. Again, he's RB18, so he's right in between David Montgomery and Brian Robinson, which feels right. I do think he's priced accurately, or at least close to it. So again, you're probably looking at an early second rounder. I doubt you're getting a first round pick for Deandre Swift, but you might be able to. Turned 24 yesterday, actually. So happy birthday, Deandre.
He's
from
only
yours truly here at
24.
RTM.
Oh my goodness, that's
24, man.
insane.
He's still super young, coming off a career year too, which is why I think this is a good sell high candidate. He had his career high in rushes, 229, 1,049 yards on the ground, 5 rushing touchdowns, which honestly felt like a miracle that he got in the end zone 5 times with the tush push. It was just like the amount of times he got inside like the 5 or 3 yard line and then would get trotted off for the tush push was just infuriating. If you were a DeAndre Swift owner, caught another 39 balls too for just over 200 yards and another touchdown there. So RB20 on the year. I do think his splits for like pre-buy and post-buy were a little confusing to me. Was just digging into it today, and I was like, it it felt like the eye test that he kind of fell off, but the stats really back it up here. He was top 15 in 6 out of the first 9 weeks, which felt right. Like the DeAndre Swift show was like very much a thing early on in the year. After the bye, though, he only cracked top 15 twice in his last 7 games. Missed week 18 as well due to injury. So only played 16 this year. But it just felt like that offense as a whole, just like we're seeing it right now, like it just felt like they completely crumbled down the stretch.
It
I don't know
just
if it's
died,
because
man.
they weren't using him or what it was, but the usage was not the same down the stretch. Again, yeah. So like you could argue maybe he builds on this next year. Maybe he regresses, and there's not as many tush pushes for Jalen, and he gets some of these. Maybe he gets closer to 10 touchdowns next year on the ground. It's just not something I'm very confident in. I'd probably rather flip him while his value's high. Missed some games early in his career too, so I think playing 16 games this year was like a huge win for DeAndre Swift. I know like that was a big knock on him in Detroit was, can he even stay on the field with this type of volume? And he did that, which is awesome. So I'm selling high on DeAndre Swift. Just not someone that I personally like going forward.
No notes, man. I that was looking like a big hit for the first half of the year where I was like kind of in on DeAndre Swift. I thought it was like a nice play, and we had him in Scott Fishbowl, and he was really good for the first half of the year. And maybe that offense died, and you can write that off, but I don't think he's a bell cow running back.
No, definitely not. Like just like the size alone. The fact that he had 200 plus carries and only missed 1 game, I was pretty surprised. Yeah, that was not in the range of outcomes for me. Looking at 2023.
You just need another back to mix up with him because he's still really good. But like, I don't know. I
agree. Yeah, I agree.
He's probably fine where he's valued at, but yeah, I'd probably want to get off.
Yeah,
because you could probably convince somebody that he's still going to be the guy next year.
I agree. Like you could get a second rounder, like at worst.
Yeah. The last guy I got here is David Njoku. Chief Njoku, honestly, one of my favorite players to watch this season. Age 27, tight end 7 on keep trade cut. So I love a David Njoku, but he's a great player, but this is just a sell high. I got a stat for you. In 6 career games with Joe Flacco, David Njoku is averaging 17 fantasy points per game. In 90 career games without Joe Flacco, David Njoku is averaging 7.5 fantasy points per game. It's a bit of a difference.
Those are pretty dramatic splits.
Pretty. And you're like, okay, well, what about his rookie year? What about a couple years of bet? Whatever. David Njoku, playing with Deshaun Watson, who's going to be his quarterback next year, has averaged 9.5 fantasy points per game, which would have put him at tight end 12 this year behind Dalton Schultz and Dalton Kincaid.
Yep.
Evan Ingram, who's about a year and a half older than David Njoku, is in a better situation, has put up better and more consistent fantasy numbers over the past couple years, and is currently the tight end 12. I'd much rather have Evan Ingram than David Njoku, who's the tight end 7. Even though I
completely agree.
Njoku's a boss. He's a baller, man. I think he's very good. So it sucks to trade good players. I've got 3 really good players that I'm advocating for trade here. But
yeah, these are all guys you really like. This is this is hard for you. This is like throwing away like your old toys or something,
But at the end of the day, like I feel like when you're selling guys, you should sell guys that you don't feel that great about selling. You want to be fearful when others are greedy, and you want to be greedy when others are fearful. And I feel like David Njoku is just probably the top. Probably. It's probably the top of his production.
I would think so. I find it hard to believe too, like you said, that with Deshaun next year that he replicates what he had seen. Like this was like a career highs in like every category, catches, yards,
He
touchdowns. Yeah, it
averaged
was
9 catches for 80 yards and close to a touchdown per game with Joe Flacco.
it was pretty awesome. But Joe Flacco is not coming back. You were stuck with Deshaun Watson,
Yeah.
and who knows? Maybe Deshaun Watson's better next year. We thought this was going to be the year where he shook off the rust, just instead got injured, missed most of the year. Who
I
knows?
don't think
Maybe he
that guy
surprises
likes
us,
playing
but
football. I don't think that guy's that. He doesn't look like someone who's ready to take hits.
yeah, he's
I don't think he's got it.
he got his money, but no, I think that's a good one too. Yeah, like I'm kind of just looking at some of the tight ends in that range too. You got Kyle Pitts ahead of him, who I would rather have. Jake Ferguson two below him, even a Cole Kmet, George Kittle. Yeah, I think I'd rather have those guys, man. It just
I'd
feels
rather
like
have
with their QB
George Kittle than
situation, we're
I'd rather have George Kittle than
for
David
sure.
Njoku. Are you kidding me? Even though Kittle's 30, but like,
Yeah,
come on now,
no, that's an
really?
easy one.
Kittle's
It's like
honestly
we
a
talked
buy
about
low.
in last episode with like Purdy. It's like Kittle's going to be around at least 2 more years there.
Probably.
So
I hope. I
no,
love
no, I
Kittle.
like that one. Yeah, he's just a rock star. So no, that's
Yeah,
a good sell
legend.
though. That's a tough one.
All right, I'm selling Jalen Hurts, David Njoku, Kenneth Walker, Aiden. Who you getting off of?
We are selling Patty Mahomes, Christian Watson, and Deandre Swift.
Wow, you really led with Pat Mahomes. You greedy bastard. I love it. I love it.
I know. I couldn't believe it. I was writing it down and I was like, this isn't for the faint of heart, man.
Aiden, thank you for joining us as always. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you riding with us. This Dynasty content's a ton of fun. We will be coming out with more rookie-specific Dynasty content, maybe some Dynasty rankings next week. We'll see. We'll see.
Yep.
But Aiden,
Yep.
again, thanks, man. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Yes, sir.
Until next time.
Later, mean team.